Welcome back to the thrilling continuation of the 80-Hour Developer. In this video, we're going to pick up exactly where we left off last time. So if you'll recall, we had just created the ability for a user to log in and to create a ticket which we know is being stored in the database. The next ticket that we have here, the next thing we need to do, is to make sure a user can only see their tickets. So we're going to start this the way that we start everything. We're going to create a new branch for this ticket. And you'll see that I already have one, so we're just going to check out directly into it. Okay. Now, if you think about the way that we have our database set up, our tickets table isn't letting us determine which ticket is owned by which user. So let's go into our migration and let's change this and let's add in this. Unsigned integer means that it's always going to be a positive number, and then we're going to expect that we get a user ID. Okay, so now let's come back to our tickets test and ask ourselves the question, how are we going to test this? Well, I'm going to move these to separate lines just to be a little easier to read. I think the first thing we want is to be able to have access to the user that's created in this method. So let's do this. We're going to return the user back from login user. And now we're going to say that we expect to see a user ID there. Okay. Now, if I run this test, we're going to do an AF, which is going to run our migrations. And we're going to run this test. And we get this big long error. And this all comes up because it says user ID doesn't have a default value. So let's go into our controller and look at what's happening here. In our tickets controller, we're creating this, but we're not giving it a user ID right now. So let's do that. And now everything passes. So looking at our test, we can be sure that a logged in user, when they create a ticket, has a ticket with the name, the description, and their user ID attached to it. Okay, so now let's figure out how we want to test the logic for TI5, which is that if we have more than one user, each user can only see their tickets. So users can only see their tickets. So let's think about this in terms of arrange, act, assert. So given we have two users who each have one ticket, okay, so let's create two users. And in fact, let's create tickets in a ticket factory and automatically assign them to a user. So we can actually get rid of this step. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a ticket factory. And I've already created this while I was doing my testing. So let's go into our ticket factory. The ticket has a name and a description, and we know we need to pass it a user ID. So how are we going to do this? Well, we could just make up an ID here, but we'd be much better off to actually create a user in our database and assign that so that any relationships would work. So you've probably seen Jeff do this in some of the courses. We're going to create a function. Okay. So we're going to create, and now let's refactor this so it's a little easier to understand. We're saying that a user is this factory created user, and then we're going to put the user ID in the user ID here. Okay, so now when we come back to our ticket test, we can say ticket1 equals create, oops. And we can do this for ticket 2 as well. Now, because each ticket has a user, what I'd like to be able to do is to say user1 equals ticket1 user. Well, let's do that. Let's go into our ticket class and let's create a relationship. Okay, and again, this is all from the basic Introduction to Laravel course, so this should all be very familiar. We're saying that every ticket belongs to a user, and Laravel, because it's magic, knows to expect that user in from the ID in the user ID column. Okay, if we named it something different, we could specify that here, but we're just going to use the standard defaults and make our life easier. So now, when we're in our ticket factor, or when we're in our tickets test, we can do this. We can say user1 is ticket1 user, and user2 is ticket2 user. And so what we want to say is that if and we want to see ticket 1 name, but we don't want to see ticket 2 name. Okay, so let's see where this fails on us. And this is saying that, oh, it's not getting, so it's expecting a user, and this isn't a user object for somewhere. So let's die and dump what is user1? No, we've got a user there. Interesting. There we go. I'd put brackets around it when I shouldn't have. Okay, so where does it fail? It fails at line 51. So it expects to see this and it doesn't see it. Well, that makes sense, right? If we think about what we see when we open our ticketing app, this is all that we have. So let's go to our home page. We're actually going to take out a lot of this and we're just going to make this uglier for now and simpler. Okay, so let's do this. Now I want to go to my home controller. And what's the easiest thing we could do here? Well, the easiest thing I could do here is to grab all of the tickets and pass them through. And then on my home page, I could display all of these tickets, right? So I could do this. Okay, and if I come back to my ticket test and I take that out, I think this should pass. And it does. But when I add this back in, so that I expect that I don't see ticket 2, because that belongs to user 2, I expect this to fail. Okay, so we know why this is happening, right? We're grabbing just every ticket. So instead, what we should be able to do is to say that the tickets are not all of the tickets. One thing we might do is to say user equals auth user. Now we could get we could say where user ID, And this should pass. And it does. But, so this is a workable solution, right? We're saying the user is logged in, and we want the tickets where the user ID is equal to our user's ID, our logged in user's ID. And there we're only getting the tickets we expect to see that are attached to that user. This is okay. But a better way that we could do this, a refactor that we could make here, would be to say that we know that a user owns tickets. So let's go to our user model. And let's say that this user has many tickets. And by the same magic as before, this knows that it's going to be looking for the user ID in the ticket class. So now I can come back to this controller and I can actually get rid of all of this. What I can do instead is in my home, I can say for each and this should pass as well. Okay, I'm saying for each of the logged in users' tickets as a ticket, then list out the ticket name. And if we want, and I highly recommend this, in our ticket test, we can get explicit. So we should do this, and now we'll say we're going to log in as user 2. We expect to see ticket 2, and we expect not to see ticket 1. And this still works. Perfect. Okay, so we are now done this item. A user can only see their tickets. We'll run a full test suite just to make sure. Perfect. Okay, so we've merged that change in. That's done. So what are we going to do in our next video? Well, I think that what we should do is to set up our ability to move tickets between to do, in progress, and done. There's going to be some assumptions we're going to make there, but I think that puts us in a pretty good spot. Before we do that, though, there's a couple of little conveniences I want to add in. And this is something that I saw in one of Jeff's videos a couple of years ago, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. I don't like typing out this factory ticket create every time, so we're going to create a little convenience method in our tests, and we're going to create this file. We'll do it like this. Okay. And we'll say function create, and we will say model attributes number of items. Okay, and here we go. Now, this isn't going to work right off the bat. What we also need to do is come into our composer file, and we're going to auto load files. We're going to say tests. Okay, and I think this will do it for us. Okay, so now we're going to do a composer dump. Oops, composer dump auto load. And it doesn't like, oh yes, it doesn't like the public in here. Okay, so we're just gonna, there we go, function. Okay, perfect. So now if I come back into my ticket test, I should be able to refactor all of these factory methods to instead just say create. And similarly down here, I'm going to create a user class. And do I have a factory anywhere else in here? No, so I should be good. Okay, so now let's run our tests. It doesn't like our create method. Oh yes, equals null. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is the helper function that we've put into place. And what this lets us do is whenever we want to use a model factory, we can just call this create instead, and it's going to push that object to our database in whatever model factory that we've defined. So it just makes it a little easier to say, look, I just want to create a ticket. I want to create a ticket. I want to create a user. I want to create whatever it is that I'm putting together. So with this in place, we are in good stead to finish this video. And in the next video, we will start figuring out how to move these tickets between different categories. Hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.